It's Friday. That means it's time to check in on what's happening in the Sunshine State. It's our segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Joining us is my sister, Miranda, Florida-based correspondent extraordinaire. Hello.
Hello.
I want to talk about, I thought it'd be interesting because we've been talking a lot about our legislative session in Washington State, the bills being introduced during Florida's legislative session, much different than ours. So I thought it'd be nice to touch on a couple of those. But first, I had to ask you about this. So on MSNBC, Jason Johnson, who I didn't even know who that was. Unfortunately, now I've become familiar with his style of news. He is an MSNBC contributor. He was talking to a guest about Ron DeSantis's presidential hopes, I guess. He hasn't launched a bid yet, and this is what he said about the state of Florida.
In my view, there are 3 states yet you can't really run from if you're trying to win across America. You run from New York, you're too crazy, you're liberal. You run from California, you're too crazy, you're liberal, you're trying to make sure I can't get plastic straws. You run from Florida, it's all crystal meth and alligators, right? Like, I mean, that's what people think. And I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm saying those are sort of the national reputations of those states. So when you see Ron DeSantis running and claiming that he's going to do for America what he's done in Florida, it seems like that'd be a problem.
Before I have you comment on that, he also went on to, I was kind of curious, like, where is he going with that? What is he, where is this heading? And then he played this clip from Ron DeSantis and sets it up as if like Ron DeSantis is totally out of touch.
I'm going to play you some sound from him and then also how that's failed in the past and get your thoughts on the other side.
So what have we done in Florida? When they were talking about defunding police and slashing budgets, we said, not on my watch. As much as I'm proud that Florida is doing well, I want the country to do well. I want all of these communities to do well.
Now, Kurt, that may make sense in some context. He can talk about policy, right? Mm-hmm. But are those policies the first things that everybody thinks about coming out of Florida?
No. I mean, we must have entered some sort of quantum realm here if Ron DeSantis thinks that the entirety of the United States of America wants to have happen in our country what he has done to the state of Florida. If he thinks, for instance, that most of this country, they want to spend their time banning books, if they want to spend their time dealing with mass shootings, if they want to spend their time ignoring the catastrophic impacts of climate change, which, by the way, will hit the state of Florida first, that's not a recipe for...
Okay, so first of all, when you hear him say that when people think of Florida, they just think of crystal meth and alligators. Your reaction as a Floridian?
I mean, as a Floridian and as just a person in general, of course, it's pretty ignorant to nail any state down to 2 characteristics. Alligators, I'll support that. You know, like we have football teams named after gators, and you come down and you want to come see gators. We'll take that. We'll take the gators. But first of all, I don't think any state in America is free from claiming meth. You know what I mean? We all have a huge epidemic here when it comes to that, but it also is just like really uneducated to say that, because Florida's a beautiful state. And to me, you think sunshine and beaches. Those are things that come to mind when I think of Florida, even before all the political stuff.
Yeah. And I think of definitely sunshine, beaches. And I mean, yeah, you're right about alligators. That's why in the Florida Report intro, we have a little alligator creeping in who meows. And nobody seems to have a problem with the alligator meowing, which I always thought was funny. But I also don't understand, you know, for this like leftist news organization, MSNBC, to insult an entire state like that. To what end?
Yeah, I mean, he even went on to say some stuff about a couple other states. Like if you run out of California or New York or Florida, you have a hard time escaping like, you know, I guess the stigma that comes with those states. But that's also just, of course, one man's opinion, because I don't think a lot of people think about meth when they think about Florida, even if they are thinking about alligators. But I did actually say something about this during that Q&A that we did together. Somebody had asked, you know, what I thought maybe DeSantis' biggest obstacle would be. And it was getting out of that Florida man stigma, but I think that he's proven there's so much more to the state of Florida than, you know, alligators and things like that. So, you know, that's just kind of an ignorant way to portray our state and our governor. Period.
Yeah. And to alienate if there is, Democrats need to win Florida, they need to win there. And that's kind of one of the states where it's like they look to that as a bellwether for who's going to eventually win the presidency. And so just to like say, chalk it up to, alligators and meth, it seems super condescending and super strange. And then there was a reaction from a Twitter account I thought was pretty funny too. You want to read that?
Yeah, this comes out of DeSantis War Room Twitter account. It says MSNBC contributor Dr. Jason Johnson claimed that when people think of Florida, they mostly think of crystal meth and alligators. Dr. Johnson would know all about that because he came to Florida to campaign for Andrew Gillum, later found passed out in a hotel with crystal meth.
Got him. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I gotta be morally consistent there. And yeah, crystal meth usage, unfortunately, is something that isn't relegated to one political party or another. So just an odd line.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about a couple of things happening in Florida's legislative session. We know there's this huge conversation around people who want to transition from the gender they were born into a different gender. And in Florida, there's a bill that would essentially mandate that companies cover detransitioning. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's a new bill that was filed this week, would require companies offering gender reaffirming healthcare to be liable for an employee's detransition. It's the proposed Reverse Woke Act, it's called. It was filed on Monday by a Florida senator. It would require companies to pay for an employee's detransition, even if that employee is no longer with the company or received the treatment out of state.
Interesting. So basically, kind of putting companies on notice that, hey, if you're going to cover transitional surgeries for people, then you're going to have to cover detransitional surgeries if they choose to do that.
Absolutely. And I actually think that that's kind of like, is so ironic because technically it would be the same thing either way. They'd be transitioning to what they identify as, whether it's a reversal or a move into something different. It's all the same thing. So they would probably have to cover that even if they're offering it to begin with. I don't know. It kind of just goes in circles at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they're just kind of sending a message, and maybe you'll have companies that, if that law were to pass, that rethink whether they're going to cover transitional surgeries, if they could be on the hook forever, whatever that person decides to do, if they bounce back and forth or whatever. That's interesting. Never even thought of that. Yeah. And then there was this other one that's not political, but I thought it was a good topic of debate. So it has to do with dogs, which we all have an opinion on, and the little pups sticking their head out of car windows.
Yeah, so it's a new bill that has been proposed in Florida that would like enact a series of guidelines and protections against like allowing your dog to sit in your lap while you drive, stick its head out the window while it's in the car. It goes as far to say that your dog or cat or animal that you're transporting needs to be either in a crate or with a pet safety belt or some kind of tether in the vehicle, and then not being cared for by the driver, which is really restrictive to me. I mean, I'm all for safety because, having a dog jump around the car sometimes is a little difficult to drive with. And of course, sticking any head out the window is also dangerous in and of itself. But who doesn't like to see a little dog poking its head out the window at rush hour?
That's what I was thinking. It makes me so happy. And the little doggies with their tongues out. That's ridiculous. That's way too much. I mean, I agree with the no dogs on your lap. And I think that just goes hand in hand with other aspects of distracted driving. Like, that's just silly. But I mean, there are plenty of times where it's perfectly safe for your little happy dog to stick its head out the window. And I'm sorry, I'm not restraining my dog with a dog safety harness. Okay. It's just not happening.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a few other things in here, like some restrictions on tethering your dog to like trees or posts out in your yard without supervision, and decline cats, and the sale of rabbits being restricted. So there's some other things in there that make sense, but it's kind of a trail mix of things all wrapped up in one bill. So hopefully they can weed out some of those really annoying gray areas.
Just like over dog regulation. Yeah. I'm not someone who would tether my dog out in the yard, but I also don't live in the country. I mean, we grew up, that was a very normal thing. It doesn't mean you don't love them. Obviously, you don't want a dog just like for hours out, being able to get off the property or whatever. But that seems odd to me too, and just like an overreach. So interesting stuff out of Florida. Well, Miranda, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great weekend.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.